With the constant threat of cyber attacks, it's critical for security teams to stay one step ahead of attackers. The old saying, prevention is better than cure, is especially relevant in the world of cybersecurity. And threat modeling is one of the best preventive ways to protect organizations from cyber attacks. Threat modeling is a process for identifying and addressing security threats to your applications. By following the 3 steps of threat modeling, you can improve the security of your applications and protect your organization from cyber attacks. In this video, you will discover the 3 steps of threat modeling. These are: decompose the application, determine and rank threats, and determine countermeasures and mitigation. Let's start with step 1, which is decomposing the application. When decomposing an application, it is essential to consider all its different components and how attackers could interact with the application through these components. Components of an application include the user interface. This is the part of the application that users interact with directly. It is important to consider how an attacker could exploit vulnerabilities in the user interface, such as input validation errors to gain access to the application or to steal data. Another component is the database, where the application stores its data. Think of how an attacker could gain access to the database, such as through SQL injection attacks, or how they could corrupt the data. Next is the backend code. Ask yourself how attackers could exploit vulnerabilities in the code that runs the application. For instance, attackers could use buffer overflows to enter an application and extract data. The network infrastructure is another component. This includes the network that the application is connected to, as well as the servers and routers that are used to route traffic to and from the application. How could an attacker exploit weaknesses in the network infrastructure? An example is a man-in-the-middle attack, which enables unauthorized access or operational disruption of an application. And then you should also consider the operating system, the software that runs the computer that the application is hosted on. Think about the strategies an attacker could employ to leverage flaws in the operating system. For example, attackers might execute a privilege escalation attack to infiltrate an application and tamper with its functionality. Lastly, you should consider the hardware or physical components of the computer that the application is hosted on, such as the CPU, memory, and storage devices. Examine how an attacker could take advantage of hardware security weaknesses. A concrete example involves a physical access attack, granting attackers entry to the application or enabling operational interference. Once you understand the application's components and how they interact, you can begin to identify potential threats, which brings you to step 2 of the threat modeling process: determining and ranking threats. In this step, you should consider the following factors. First, the likelihood of the threat occurring. You can determine this factor by considering the attacker's required skill level and the availability of tools and resources to perform the attack. Also, take into account the presence or absence of security controls aimed at preventing or halting attacks. For example, an attack that can only be executed by highly skilled attackers with specialized tools is less likely to occur, and therefore poses a less prominent threat than commonly executed attacks. Second is the impact of the threat if it occurs. Here, you should consider the loss of data, the financial impact, and the damage to reputation that an attack could cause. For example, a threat that could lead to the loss of sensitive data will have a larger impact than one that only causes a minor inconvenience. And lastly, is the ease with which a threat can be executed. Consider the complexity of the attack, the availability of information about the attack, and the visibility of the vulnerability. For example, the effects of a vulnerability that is easy to exploit will likely be more severe than that of a difficult one. Once you have considered all of these factors, You can rank the threats in terms of severity. There are models for doing this, which you will learn more about later. Let's move to the third and final step of threat modeling, determining countermeasures and mitigation. Countermeasures are measures you can take to prevent a threat from occurring, while mitigations are measures you can take to reduce the impact of a threat if it occurs. Some examples of countermeasures and mitigations include implementing security controls like firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and access control lists. Next is training users on security best practices around password security, phishing awareness, and social engineering. Conducting penetration testing is also a useful countermeasure used as a probing exercise to discover any vulnerabilities. Another example is patching vulnerabilities, the process of applying software updates that fix security vulnerabilities. And finally, red teaming is used to simulate an attack on organizations by a team of security professionals. The specific countermeasures and mitigations you choose will depend on the identified threats. In conclusion, threat modeling is a proactive process for identifying and addressing security threats to your applications to prevent possible attacks. It places security teams in the attacker's seat, forcing them to critically examine an application's security shortcomings. By following the 3 steps outlined in this video, you can preempt cyber assaults by improving the security of your applications, thereby staying ahead of potential attackers.